We were just talking before. In fact, I called you a polymath, and you said in your native Manchester you'd be called a jack of all trades, which was quite funny. But we then were also talking about, as a kid, how you listened to the radio with such intensity. Can you start by telling us a bit about that?
Yeah, we hit upon. I was talking about a new record that's coming out at the beginning of next year. Quick plug, and we're talking about a commercial sound that I was very drawn towards as a child. About 12, I'd wag school and sort of sit at home listening to the radio obsessively, trying to sort of capture in my mind what it was about the way music was put together. I mean, you know, I have friends who go like, well, I don't get it. It's just this coming out of the speakers, so what's the big deal? But for me, there was something about a sort of emotional resonance in the way certain sounds were put together and the effects even that were put on. I can remember as a kid my mum singing Who's Sorry Now, which is this song by Brenda Lee, is it? I can't remember. So, yeah. And it has this incredible sort of violin swoop that sort of it sits in with the lyric and almost like drives it home into this place. And it's because it has this certain sound that you get this kind of like thing about it. And so I guess that's a bit of me being around the family as well and their reaction to music and how it was working. But I was really sort of fascinated with that as a place of sort of sound beginning as a child.
And then when you were 19, you went for an audition with a... Is it true, that what I've read, that you went for an audition for magazine with a two-string bass that you'd borrowed from somebody?
Yeah, well, I think it was a bit earlier than that, actually. I think I was just about 18, and I bumped into a friend of mine on the street, and he took me. We went to his house, and his brother had all these instruments lying around, which was so it's like sort of a kid in a sweet shop, and he had this bass, 2 strings on it. He said, "You can have that. Don't really want that. We don't really need that." So I went to buy the other 2 strings and saw the advert for Howard Devoto of Buzzcocks was forming a new band and wanted people to join him, and so I thought, wow, you know, that's. I mean, there'd been this sort of drive from that point of listening to the radio into being involved in some way. And I think previous to that, I'd been to Earl's Court to see Led Zeppelin. And they had it was this enormous sort of, you know, it was an incredible show with the PA hanging, you know, in chains from the roof and this massive thing. And I just thought, how do you do that? You know, how do you get from here to there?
What, from the audience to the stage?
Well, not physically, but I mean, as a sort of career path, you know. And it just, and then, you know, wonderfully, punk music came along, and I remember sort of sitting in a club next to somebody from the Buzzcocks, Pete Shelley was, and he was sort of like having a drink, just put the drink down, and just got up and picked up a guitar and started playing, and I was like, wow, it's as if, you know, that distance then became really small, so it seemed possible to do that with the 2 strings. So I stayed up all night, and I didn't have an amplifier or anything, but the bed had the sort of wooden stand on it, which if you leant the neck on it and played the bass, it sort of resonated through the whole bed. So the bed became this big amplifier. So I stayed up all night, just going doom, 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 this one note on one of the strings. And so I went to the audition the next day, and the first thing he played me was this song, and he'd written this guitarist. He says, "This is called The Light Pours Out of Me." I sort of went, wow. So I played my one note in this sort of rhythm, and it fitted beautifully. And he went, "That's it, you're in." And so then, of course, many nights were spent awake on the bed, waiting for it to sort of take off and playing the songs. And so that was the sort of the way I kind of got into the thing, from having been thinking it's impossible to then doing it.
And I mean, it'd be great to talk in real time about your career, which sadly we haven't got time for. But the kind of going from magazine and playing with Nick Cave and then working on your own for the first time.
Yep.
How did your kind of attitude to music progress over that time, and how you heard music, and because it must have changed, it must have developed in a certain way.
Sure, but thinking about it now, I feel like I was always heading to the place I am now, very much with magazine and Nick. We had 2 sort of amazing lyricists who were kind of making these sort of stories and sort of pictures, if you like, through the the way they were putting it together. And I almost sort of felt this sort of thing to go like, oh, it'd be interesting if you could kind of almost sketch that in the background, or hit the piano in a certain way, or play the chord a certain way that would emphasize, you know. I remember when we were doing this song From Her to Eternity, and you know, and Nick sort of going over the lyrics again and again and again, and trying to find these like sounds, and Blixa Bargeld kind of digging out these weird things, and me sort of trying to root it with my one note, and you know, and so that became almost like a, if you like, a kind of learning place for later in terms of making music to picture, if you like, because pictures were already sort of happening with both of those bands, as well as the sort of like, here's a song and you just, you know, play it.
I mean, are you quite a visual thinker? Will you write music, and will there be images that go with the music? Well,
I think that's you know, one of the function of cinematic music is that.
But has that always been there for you? Well,
I guess it must be. I mean, even going back to sort of that thing I was telling you about at the beginning, there was an idea forming there where it is a sort of visual idea, really. It's a visual, I guess, emotional, and you'll see. I don't know. For me, I'm seeing something as I'm writing, and particularly with the leaning to cinema, you write in terms of a lyric and convey something that might be a picture. That was the whole point of My Side Story, really, the first record I made after that.
Which was a soundtrack to an imaginary film?
Yeah, I guess, well, that's how it got sort of played.
Is that what you set out to write, or is that how it was interpreted afterwards?
Well, a bit of both, I suppose. I started off just wanting to sort of do something, and there was a sort of catch-22. It's like I wanted to write music for film, but the catch-22 was you can't really write music for film unless you've written music for film. So I thought, well, I'll write music for film, even though there was no film. And that got sort of latched onto very quickly. And I'd realised that other people were sort of doing that along the way anyway. I wasn't, you know,
with an eye to film,
with
basically.
An eye to film,
or an ear to film.
And
that's interesting.
but for me, it was a sort of exploration of an idea, which was there's this place that was sort of had a kind of, you know, noirish overtone that I could then use to make something about the internal sort of workings of myself, if you like. So it was this sort of self-portrait as a place. That's the way I approached it.
And did David Lynch get in touch with you as a result of that?
Not as a direct result of that, although I did go to America off the back of that straight away. Somebody heard it, and I went to work on a film out there called Delusion, and also another film, I think My Crazy Life, I think it was called, and because people did actually believe it was a soundtrack, especially when they were kind of quite far away and the time it was. Okay.
So what happened with David Lynch? Did you get a call? Did you go to him, or did he come to you?
He called me up.
This is for the Lost Highway, by the way.
Yeah, so we're a bit further along now, and I'm still sort of chiseling away, doing stuff. And I just finished an album called Soul Murder, and oh no, it was Oedipus actually, Oedipus Schmiedipus, and he's a good boy and he loves his mother. And so I had a little bit of a body of work, if you like, and then I'd had some terrible health problems. I have sort of this bone disease, if you like, and so my arms and my legs sort of have this, and I've had sort of multi sort of hip replacements and this kind of thing.
Because don't your shoulders dislocate?
Oh, my shoulders dislocate. Do yours?
No.
No. And
I don't know why I'm sounding so empathetic.
So anyway, I was wheelchair bound for quite a while, and so I was sort of like living in London, and I was going up and down the corridor pretending I was in Ironside, and I was just sort of not Mark, the other bloke, but sort of switching between two, and I was like going like, and I thought, you know what, I'm going mad here. So why don't I just do what I do, and that's write music. So I got everything brought to the house from the little studio I had down the road. Started to write this music. And I went da 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 da. So that's great, big band, brassy. Da, da, da. Then the phone goes and it says, "Is that Barry?" "Yeah." "Hi, this is David Lynch. I've been listening to your music for 10 hours straight."
Did you think it was him, or did you think it was one of your mates messing around?
No, I kind of knew because I got a tip off ahead of time, you see. Okay. One of the, from the publishing company said, David Lynch is going to phone you at 5 o'clock. And I was like, yeah. And I thought that was the...
Okay, that was the,
well, maybe Kenny Lynch, not David Lynch, you know. But anyway, so he said, you know, the phone go, and this is what happened. And he goes, I'm going to send you a piece of, a scene from a new movie I'm making. And the big instruction was, show it to no one. And he said, I'll send you this scene, put some music to it, and let's see where we go from there. And funny enough, the scene arrives, and the music that I was writing that day fits beautifully to this part. So I didn't have much work to do. And sent it off to him. So it was great. Come over and write the rest of the film. But I'm in a wheelchair. You know, he says, that's okay, Barry. I'll have my guys carry you on their shoulders. You know, there was stuff going like. But there were, you know, and so yeah, I went over and finished the rest of the half of the score, because Angelo Badalamenti was already doing some of the score, and he's a kind of brash character who would sort of get certain scenes. I don't want to do that. Like, so I'll do that one.
So, how closely did you work with Lynch then? I mean, how did that process?
Very close.
Were you literally kind of sitting there watching?
He has the sort of he has a kind of a complex at his house. So you walk in one room and there's people sat editing, you know, old Steenbecks, sort of, you know, editing the film, and then I'm in another room with sort of synths and this sort of stuff, and so he's doing that sort of you know, company sort of boss of walking into each situation and going, you know, and saying what's going on here, you know. And so you also, what was fantastic at that time for me as well, as a sort of aspiring, you know, person in composition and all the rest of it, is you get this, like, these free little master classes. You know, he would come in and go, you're almost there, but look at their eyes. And then you sort of look at their eyes, you know, look at like a scene and watch, and then you do something else and go, that's it. And then you go and play the scene to a test audience that evening and call you up and go, you nailed them. We got it, you know, and so it's all very...
So it's very reactive.
Very reactive, yeah. So that was a good time.
And how did that, working with him, compare to, you then went on to work with Oliver Stone and Danny Boyle. How, because, I mean, actors work different, I mean, directors work differently, don't they? Some are very hands-on, like Lynch obviously is.
Sure, yeah.
And some, I know Danny's very fond of kind of saying, oh, just get on with it.
Yeah, and then,
which can go either way. But do you prefer creative interference, or do you like to be able to get on with your own thing? I
think it's a project-by-project thing as well, and a director-by-director. I mean, I've worked with some directors, and I've gone, so what are we? And they're going like, I don't know. I don't listen to music. And you go, okay.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
But I can, you know, having made film, I can sort of, I get it.
Yeah.
If you're so embroiled in the story and what's going on here, that music is maybe going to get you from there to there, then, you know, and it's not something you maybe go home and
it becomes totally incidental then.
Yeah, maybe, yeah. Whereas for somebody else, it's everything. And you know, the importance of how the music sits and hangs emotionally, and the idea of sound and what the mood is sort of everything to me. But I've kind of, it's funny, over the years, I've sort of caught myself sort of backing off, if you like. And if, you know, and I've even said to a director, don't put music there, just use the sound, just use what's going on. You know, what you can see like that, you know. Great thing that Lynch told me was like, if you make, you know, because we were talking about film noir, and I was kind of, you know, really want to make stuff one day. He's going like, well, let me tell you this, Barry, when you record the rooms, slow it down like that. So it's great. So when the people are talking in the room, it feels like the action is sort of slightly suspended.
Oh, that's brilliant.
All the time.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic one.
Yeah.
I believe that Tim Brown, the director, has nicked that one, and he tells all the students all the time. Oh, well, no.
And did you? At what point did you think you wanted to get behind the camera and make your own films? And do you then become, this polymath thing kind of kicks in a bit because you can do everything? I mean, you
well, not really, but
you're being modest. Well, you can have a go, can't you? You're in a better position than most.
Let's have a go. No, I think it's a thing of it's like an interdiscipline thing. You know, I get this sort of a feeling, if you like. Say you're sitting at the piano writing a melody for a film and you come up with a rhythm. I've noticed that when you've got a piece of film and you're cutting it, there's something also about the rhythm that's going on, and then also the visual eye in terms of the way you might see something in a still camera and then watch it move. And the extension of that frame into 24, you know, all of that stuff seems to be exactly, I don't know, I mean, this may sound stupid, but to me it feels the same as going back to that idea where the one note in the bass provides this thing that serves the rhythm, lets the melody run free in a certain way. And so they're all, I see it as a sort of, all from the same well, if you like,
I guess
in different disciplines.
Yeah, it's about telling a story with sound and image. Basically, the two things are so intertwined.
Oh, really? I believe they are really necessarily. So, and you can then flip it. You know, you can take one away and then see what happens there, or you can like manipulate. You know, and that's the job. That's what we do. We sit in the dark, pay money, you know, and let someone manipulate us, which sounds awful if you think about it. But as you know, as a sort of trusted artist, that's what I get from that. Anyway.
And do you go and watch films now and listen to the score and listen to the music, or can you watch it as a layperson, so to speak?
You've got to, because otherwise, you know, you don't get it. So like for the first 3 minutes, I'm going, like, you know, sort of like in there going, and then stop and go, right, just watch the film. You know, you can do all that later, you know, if you want to go away.
And other composers that you really admire?
Well, I guess, you know, I'm sort of old school, I suppose. There's that sort of 70s period of where film language, in terms of music, was at its height, I believe. And so, you know, people like Bernard Herrmann, Morricone, John Barry, yeah, I guess that, you know, they were doing the big pictures, and they were very melodic writers. I still think that's amazing, and we're in a different time, you know. And as soon as electronic instruments came along, I mean, funny enough, electronic instruments, you know, gave me a way in, if you like, you know, with a sampler, I was able to play a kind of orchestral sound to sort of mimic something I was hearing that could later be played, you know. So all of that was really important for me at the time. But I do go back to sort of melody and emotional connection, really, from that period.
And do you just have kind of piles and piles and piles of music? Well, obviously it's on your computer now, I suppose. That's just there, sitting there as kind of stock, almost.
Some, but not as a rule. I think you
end up using most of what?
Well, you write to sort of what, you know, to what's going on at the time. Or if I might have, like I'm working on a screenplay at the moment, and I came up with a piece of music for the title, based on what was going on with the script. So that will be in the drawer, you know, so for later, you know, and I'll go back to it occasionally and sort of go, how's that playing now? But I don't have kind of like, well, I've got a few bits in the library, but I tend to sort of work as it comes up.
Okay, thank you. I think we have time for questions from the audience. I think there's a couple of mics. Gentleman there.
Hi. I just wanted to ask, David Lynch is obviously blends kind of soundtrack and sound design a lot, and what your experience was of having your input kind of melded into that sound world that he creates.
Well, I felt very fortunate because he made a reference to this record we were talking about, Moss Side Story, which a lot of it for me was based on, you know, sound as sound to irk out a certain thing. So what I ended up doing with him was, of course, there was melody and there was certain things, but we talked about an idea of just laying up. I came up with the name Scary Beds, and he went, that's perfect. So what I would do would just take synthesis of sounds and different, you know, sources anywhere and start manipulating them and messing around until you had these sort of almost just these dense beds of sound, really. That was it. So, and I think he got that I would probably be able to do that because of the, you know, the calling card that was Moss Side Story. So that was actually really good for me because I think before that I'd done a movie I think was called, I can't remember, Shuttlecock or something like this, and the guy said to me, I want you to do all this other stuff that was like nothing to do with what I felt I was able to do at the time. It's like well, let's get this guy because we want this guy, and then you get there and it's like, well, whereas with that scenario, it was perfect because I felt really, you know, as he said to me after he sent me the script for Lost Highway, I said, that was brilliant. He went, right up your alley, huh? You know, and it was, that's the truth. You know, I kind of knew instinctively what to do, if you like.
Have you ever not been able to?
Yeah, quite a few times.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've just gone, this isn't me, really. I did it recently.
You know you have to walk away.
I did it recently with something, you know, and I kind of always feel a little bit like, well, come on, you know, like, it's your job. You should be, but then I go like, well, I don't quite, you know, I think there's somebody else that could do this. It's very rare. I mean, it's not a lot, maybe twice, to be honest.
Anybody else? Come on, you must have questions.
It's horrible, this bit. If I'm out there, I go like, no.
I know, it's better being here. Actually, come on here and then you can ask
wait,
questions.
don't ask me, you know, to ask something.
You said, I'll carry on talking then. You said that your first steps in filmmaking you described as squeezing myself through the eye of the needle of fear. Mm-hmm. Do you still feel like that?
Nah, it's just something. No. Well, I think that it seemed to be this sort of, you know, big world of you know, people doing all this stuff and not really, you know. And I'd been in this one department down here, which was music, sound, you know, and then there's all these other things to consider. I think the fear lesson, once I sort of got inside the, you know, teaching myself, I guess, about, you know, lighting, the camera, and all the rest of it. I went to a school for a summer in New York and did all this sort of different things of, you know, one film with somebody else, being the cameraman, being the director, being the producer, being the, you know, and just trying to kind of cover all.
And was the course worth doing?
I think so. I mean, you know, a lot of people rubbish sort of courses, and I can see why, you know, and you kind of there going like, but my kind of, there are things today that I kind of remember and still use, you know, like setting up the first shot. I can hear the you know, the teacher from editing going, "Get it off the tripod." What? Okay, and all this sort of stuff. You know.
And I mean, I don't know how many people here are wanting to or have a working in sound or want to pursue that. But would you have other kind of any advice? I mean, your career's happened very organically, I suppose. But is there anything that you would have done differently, or looking back?
I don't see. I mean, perhaps I could have, you know.
I don't mean regrets, but
no,
just,
not at all. But I think, you know, like perhaps a full course of study, if you like. But I feel like, you know, I'm one of those sort of. I feel like I've been studying since, you know, the beginning. You know, the way I like kind of listen and I'm sort of into it.
You've done a vocational course, haven't you?
Yeah, but I think there are various ways around. I think it's your style. I think it's how you approach things. You know, like I said, for me, as a child, there was an obsession with sound that seemed to sort of.
Was anyone else in your family like that?
Not at all, except my mother had an incredible singing voice, and it was like this thing on it of its own, you know, that sort of stood out to me. But then my dad said that his grandfather could play any instrument put in front of him, whereas my dad was like, I don't even know I can't even understand the first thing about music. So maybe there was some of that going on, but for me it just seemed to fit, you know, as a sort of who I am, who I was as this little kid, kind of making sense of the world. So I guess it's how you approach it, and if you want a vocation that way, then I think it does take a certain amount of passion, no matter how you kind of go about that, and desire really to want to do that. And it's almost that thing of like, you know, you kind of have to, otherwise you're just going to sit there and kind of go, oh, you know.
I mean, I was wondering,
kind of drive, if you like,
because you've had issues with your health on and off throughout your adult life. If this kind of obsessive creativity kind of stops you from anxiety or depression, or that if you didn't do it, you'd be in trouble, basically.
I feel sometimes like that.
This has become a therapy session, unintentionally.
Well, let me tell you, I guess I catch myself sort of between projects, if you like. I just think sort of, to use an expression, I think my mojo's not working or something. I just feel a bit down, or I feel I've got the sort of blues a bit or something like that. And then I start going like, I put a hand on the piano and go, and then something starts working again. So I don't really know about that. I've never examined particularly whether I'm a sociopath, depressive, paranoid.
I wasn't accusing you of that.
No,
I was just suggesting.
I'm just having a period of self-examination that therefore needs an outlet through. I don't know. It's very possible.
But I think, how long have we got?
About
10
10 minutes.
minutes. You've talked in detail about working with Lynch, but can you tell us about The Beach and Natural Born Killers as two different processes again?
See, there's another thing that goes on when you're a writer, which is called getting music synced to film that you've already written. So with Oliver Stone, it was a very, his people, I suppose, happened upon this record of mine called Soul Murder, and a track which was called Checkpoint Charlie. And but the way I used to work with those first albums was, I wasn't really kind of over concerned with there's track one, there's track two, the traditional sense. I was doing things like, having tape sort of running around the room and recording it over there and trying to loop things and crossfade things and just to get this sort of idea across. So what they ended up doing was using about 3 pieces that ran all together, and he thought it was just this one piece called Checkpoint Charlie. So it became almost kind of score, like a bit of the score.
Yeah.
So that was quite fortunate, really, and so that was just something that was put onto the film without me having anything to do with Oliver Stone.
And would you want to see a film before licensing your music, or are you?
Well, if it's Oliver Stone making Natural Born Killers, I'd probably go like, yeah, all right, go on then, go on then, if you must, If it was, of course. But yeah, that's happened before, where I've kind of gone like, I don't know, what else are you doing with the film, that kind of stuff. But I don't like to be like that too much. I like to sort of encourage, like, okay, what have you got doing? Okay. Maybe can I just suggest that maybe, that sort of stuff, if I'm in that position. With Danny Boyle, that was a strange one, because Angelo Badalamenti had done a whole score for The Beach, and I actually thought it was, well, I'm a bit of a fan, I suppose, so I thought it was incredible. And there was all this stuff that he did with choirs and orchestras and everything. And Danny Boyle, I think, got afraid that it wasn't contemporary enough. Because I think really he wanted Underworld or something like that.
To do the whole thing.
To do the whole thing, yeah. But so he said to me, can you remix it? And then add some cues of your own. And I think the adding some cues of your own bit was a bit of a sort of... just kind of like, he really wanted me to put beats and stuff under what Angelo Badalamenti did. So it felt a bit like, there was me and I had an assistant, and he was doing this programming and going like, do you think we should be doing this? And I'm going like, no, we shouldn't,
Being given permission to.
Yeah, and then but I thought it's worth it because there's some original stuff I can do here. And I remember going to the premiere with my wife, and and other composers talk about this. I did this cue, and I thought, I've done a few that are all right, but this, when it goes right, across here and into this other scene, and then Angelo comes in, and then I kind of underpin him with this beautiful. And I sat there with the wife like that, and we were watching it, and I just give her that nudge, that sort of like, and we watched that, and it was complete silence. And I was kind of going. And the scene passed, and that was it. It was gone. And I thought, well, that's what happens, And now that I've sort of directed short films, I know exactly what that's like, because you think that's the piece of music that's incredible, and then one day you're kind of walking along and you go, and you get a different angle come, and so this heavy sort of like noir-ishy thing becomes this beautiful acoustic guitar, and for some reason something else is working. Oh, you take the thing out and it breathes, and you go, oh my God, that's perfect.
Because I think, every single successful creative person I've ever interviewed will always say, you have to be willing to chuck stuff out.
Oh yeah.
Always, and just be ruthless.
This is what I mean a little bit
all the time.
about that I backed off quite a bit. Yeah. I remember at the time being mortally offended, like going home going, oh, and all that stuff. And now I'm sort of like, that's fine, that's what you have to do. But I had to sort of go the other side of it to sort of see that. So I think I've sort of, you know, those expectations are sort of like, exactly, you have to be willing to change it around.
And we've got time for one last question. Tell us about your new album, because it sounds, if you can you?
Yeah,
Are you allowed to? It sounds, well, obviously you're allowed to. Do you choose to? It sounds exciting.
Yeah, new record coming out in beginning of February. And funny enough, it kind of goes back to this thing I was talking about when I was about 12. And there was a commercial sort of sound that kind of bled through the radio to me. And I think I've hit on a couple of moments, if you like, that really sort of satisfy that, whatever it is that makes that sort of link. And hopefully that will come across to an audience as well, and that will be sort of quite satisfying. I'm very excited about it. And I've also done a 121-page photography book to go with the record. That'll be the higher end of it, I suppose. But there'll be a 35-page sort of booklet of a travel log across America that I was able to do thanks to Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds on a tour I did with them recently. So I'm very excited about the whole thing, and I'm trying to, you know, get the thing across as I'll probably do little pop-up galleries all over the place and have the music play.
So the album's almost like a soundtrack to the photographs.
Well, yeah, a photo album, if you like.
Yeah.
Boom, boom. But yeah, hopefully it works, and hopefully people get kind of a lot from. People have said to me already that the photographs are you know, pretty good, and that they're really kind of emotionally engaging, and then I think the music becomes a kind of soundtrack to that. So.
And which way around did you do it? Did you write the music? Or?
Well, it's a bit of both, really. I can remember sort of almost like taking these photographs and then going back to the hotel and then going, oh, hang on a minute, you know, and then hearing something. And then I'd sort of have this, like, from the very small library that we talked about before, something else would step in, and I'd go, that's it, because it's coming from the same part of my brain, something like that. So that's the plug for that.
Fantastic. Well, I wish you luck with that. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you.